Some people cannot track sales off of more traditional marketing because they don't have the tech platform enablement that they need to do that. And I get that. Attribution's hard. It's complicated and it's not easy to implement. So my criticism is if you're not trying to measure something at all, right? As long as you try and put some quantifying items around executions that you're doing on the traditional side of marketing, you're at least making an effort to get some data out of it. So I think until you can get to the more insightful pieces that a true attribution strategy allows you to do across any type of marketing, you've got to try to do some of that yourself. And so kudos to the marketers out there and other team members in companies who are doing their best to put some numbers against their activities. And for those that aren't, I'm saying you better jump on the bandwagon soon because those budgets are going to get cut if you can't quantify anymore what you're delivering.
You're listening to RevOps Champions, a podcast created for B2B leaders to help you align your people, streamline your processes, trust your data, and leverage technology in order to grow your business. We're your hosts, Brendan Denewell
and Amy Weaver. Thank you, Aurora, for joining us today. You are currently a partner and fractional CMO for Chief Outsiders. You've also had a long career in marketing, specifically growth marketing. If you think back over the course of your career, I'm sure you've had some teams that have scaled a little bit more effectively than the others. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on what you think was special about the teams who had it figured out.
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting question because some of it is on me. You have to learn how to help your teams succeed, right? And when you're a new manager, you don't necessarily know that. But I think the teams that scale quickly are the best prepared teams. So whether you're bringing new people on or together, there's got to be an onboarding process of some sort. And quite frankly, Amy, post-pandemic, with people working hybrid or completely remote, that onboarding piece is kind of a lost art that needs to start to ratchet up again in some way. So I think leadership has to think through, as they're trying to scale, are your teams of people all on the same page? And do they have the same accountabilities, perspectives, knowledge, access to technology, that type of thing, to make sure we can move in the same direction. So I think for me, if I don't onboard, let's say, a digital marketing team with a traditional marketing team in an organization, that's kind of a recipe for disaster. I actually had that happen in my corporate career where the digital team wasn't fully introduced to the brand team and so didn't immerse themselves in the brand. And they ended up running the same strategy across 9 brands, which were in the same category of business. But
this is the hotel example, right?
They played to completely different audiences. And so, of course, some thrived under that digital strategy and others, we were spending money and not getting any results. And it took me a bit to figure out why. And then I realized that they just didn't have any idea. They thought a hotel was a hotel was a hotel, and the same consumers were coming to it, and that wasn't the case at all. So there's a perfect example of that onboarding piece. Had we done it properly from the beginning, the digital people would have said, well, sure, we can't attack this the same way. This is a completely different customer base we're playing to. So that's a great example.
Well, it's interesting, too, because they're all marketers, right? And I never really thought of going across different brands being cross-functional, but you're talking about cross-functional alignment between people who have a different audience that they're catering to.
You know, and as marketers, sometimes we are the worst at that, yet we should be the best because we understand that we have to tailor messages to different audiences, approaches to different audiences. But when it comes to internally working that way, sometimes that's where we fall down. Because we just assume you're all marketers, you know how to do this. And that's not fair. We need to make a much more overt approach to that internally. And I find that with my clients today now too. So that was a corporate example, but it's playing out in every client that I work with now.
What are some examples where they are missing the mark?
I work with a retailer today that has about just under 100 stores. And they're concentrated pretty much in the West and Southwest. Great company, family owned, really at an inflection point where growth is going to start to explode. E-commerce is separate from marketing. which is also separate from merchandising, et cetera. And the leadership up to this point hasn't really engaged in cross-functional teaming of any way. And as with most retailers, the merchants kind of drive everything. And so marketing and e-commerce are always at the end scrambling, try to catch up, and they're never on time with anything, can never get anything done. So we're trying to lift that a little higher, put a planning process in place that has accountability for everyone and allows people to actually think through, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? More importantly, let's put some metrics in place and see if we can shoot for these metrics and try and achieve them, which is something that is new to this organization. They just look at their sales and say, that's good, that's bad. They don't plan out how are we going to get to those sales. So it's just a different mindset and changing the culture.
I love that. I love that term, cross-functional teaming.
I think that's one of the things that has helped me be successful. You learn it at a kind of early age as a marketer. You can't possibly get things done if you don't work cross-functionally in an organization. You have to understand, if you're not part of the conversation, you better understand what the financial goals of the corporation are, and you better build your marketing strategies to fall out of those financial goals. Otherwise, you could be off doing stuff. And then that's, I think, sometimes how marketing gets a reputation of, just spending money and not making any difference in the business. They may be doing great things, but if it doesn't tree up to what the C-suite is looking for, then it doesn't really help move the needle with any kind of growth. And so that has been something I learned very, very early in my career at P&G. They're masters at all of this. And I was able to take it to every other role I played in corporate America and now with my clients.
So are you helping them establish some of those KPIs then that
Absolutely.
they haven't really been tracking before?
Absolutely. I think with 100%. I've been working Chief Outsiders for 4 years now. And I can say with certainty that 100% of my clients did not have KPIs in place for marketing. And in some cases, for their corporate strategies either. They may have a sales target, but that's it. So what are the KPIs that are going to help us hit that revenue or sales target? That's what is usually lacking. So normally I have to go in and fix that and help them put those strategies together before we can even put a marketing strategy together. Otherwise, if I try and put a marketing strategy together without those corporate KPIs, it's just, again, kind of an exercise in futility. Right. So it's great when you see your clients' eyes light up when they finally understand why you're doing what you're doing. And they say, oh, I get now why you can't do the marketing strategy yet because we had to get to this. And now we have some accountability in place. And sometimes it's an iterative process as well. It's not like I can come in and just go, okay, here's what we should be shooting for. There has to be a lot of, again, cross-functional teaming, Brendan, for me to understand what's happening in the different areas. And then make sure we're putting achievable goals in place, quantifiable, measurable, achievable goals. And then obviously some stretch goals as well.
So what sort of data do these companies have that will support establishing those?
I usually try and sit down with the CFO first to understand financially, historically, where have they been? If I can get month over month for 3 years and look at that, I can kind of see trends and patterns. So I start with that. Then, of course, from a customer standpoint, what kind of customer data do we have? So whether they sell B2B or B2C, what do we know about our customers today? And then especially for B2B, what have the historical trends been in sales with key customers and then with prospective customers that maybe we haven't been so successful with? I then do a competitive deep dive for all of my clients that goes beyond, let me look at what's happening on digital. That's really good to do, and that's a part of it. But it only talks to the people who engage with you either in e-com or digitally in different platforms, right? There's probably a whole other group of customers that you're missing if you only look at those data. A lot of people do that because it's easy and the data are pretty quick to collect. Yeah. But I tend to do a voice of the employee interview and then voice of the customer, depending upon what the client can handle. I may do a broad voice of the customer and enlist the help of an agency to do that, both customers that we have today and maybe lapsed customers, or I'll do it myself. Again, it just depends on what the capabilities are with the client. All of those data points then come together and you start to form that picture of here's where we've been, here's where we think we can go. And then I left out probably the most important thing. I do an industry, review. Where's the industry going? That kind of gets wrapped into the competitive review. But what's our opportunity in the industry? How much bigger can we grow? Do we need to start looking at branching out either to new customers in addition to the folks we're selling to or marketing to today? Or do we have to look at product development or service development and start thinking about we need to bring some innovation into our business so we can offer new products or services? And then that's a different work stream completely to help the company grow. So it's that beginning insight work that really lays the foundation for what those KPIs should be.
And is there ever a case when you feel like you need to narrow down the product or service office?
Yeah.
I would say one of our recent podcast guests shared his feeling that fanatical focus is what helped them be successful because they were kind of doing a little bit of this and dabbling in that. And they had the most success when they said, you know what, this is what we do. This is our lane. And they became the best at that.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that I and my colleagues at Chief Outsiders bring. We help companies narrow their focus and tighten up who they're talking to. So it's everything from, hey, we're trying to reach the consumer or customer in too many different ways, and we're not doing anything well. So we're really broad, but we don't go deep on anything. So let's narrow that. Also, it's maybe they're targeting too many different customer types. So it's kind of the flip side of what I just talked about as far as expanding your horizons. Maybe they've expanded too much and they're trying to do too much. And really, sometimes that grows out of a fear of the term targeting. People tend to equate targeting, if they haven't done a lot of it, with we're barring everybody else from doing business with us. And that is not the intent at all. In fact, data show time and time again that when you really get good at targeting against a certain customer type, others listen in here and come along. Right. And then as you saturate that, then you can start to expand outward. But yes, so in both of those instances, tightening things up is usually a really good, if companies aren't looking at that, that is a key to something they should be doing. Are we trying to do too much? Are we spreading our resources too thin? Not just financial, but our people as well, because then nothing's going to be done well either. And so now you're not executing well, which then feeds into the results you get.
Aurora, so it's really interesting how similar a lot of the things that you're saying are also how we start our work with clients. And you've talked about, so and cross-functional work is at the core of that. And we're talking about sort of target audiences, and of course we're always asking ourselves that question. And the same way that we're having conversations, with clients about that, but really we're selling to the entire C-suite in our case because of the cross-functional nature of the work that we do, implementing a CRM platform across, marketing, sales, customer service, and then integrating that with their ERP or whatever their back office system is, which of course goes all the way up to the CFO and the CEO and everybody in between. And Amy was asking you, and you were digging into a little bit of the sort of the data and KPI components of the work that you obviously do that is so critical at the beginning of working with a new client. Or is there one thing that you always do first, or what is the most common thing that you do first when working with a new client?
I interview everybody in the C-suite. There's usually a kickoff meeting then where I'm usually sitting in the C-suite with my peers, but I usually do a kickoff meeting with them because in many cases, there hasn't been a lead marketer in some of these organizations. Marketing, again, might be at the tail end of their processes, hence they're scrambling to keep up. But by bringing the strategic side of marketing in, you're introducing, here's how we can work together to improve growth rates in the company. And Brendan, a lot of what you just talked about that you guys do, I will bring to a company as well. So I'm working on a CRM program right now for a company who has what they're calling a loyalty program. It's more of a frequent shopper program, and it isn't integrated into a CRM tech platform. So they have it, they haven't integrated it. So we're working on that as far and getting agreement on measurement and goals. So that's an example of that. But back to your original question, I think what I try to do first is just get grounded with each member of the C-suite on their perspectives on the business. And that's what guides me to where I need to go first as far as what data to pull. Every client is different. Some are rich in data, some are not. So that also directs me, do I need to go out and mine? And I do for every client, but how much do I need to mine external sources versus what they have at hand? I think it's usually about the industry first, for the most part, really getting grounded in that, and then where the company fits in that industry today.
Right. So the end goal of all those initial meetings, starting with the leadership team and then the VOE and VOC type work that you're doing, ultimately what you're looking for is the data. So what you're saying is that you have to have all the data, and your clients need to be very clear on what the KPIs are across the different functions and for the business as a whole before you can actually get to work. Would that be correct?
I think that's fair because there has to be alignment. Um, I try to work very closely with the CFO because that individual, and if there is a RevOps team, obviously I'm working with RevOps, right? But as I can get tighter with the CFO, how she or he looks at the business and what they deem as the right way to look at the business and start to understand that allows me to then build properly for the rest of the work I'm doing. So yes, it's very data driven. It's very metrics driven. There's very little I do today that doesn't have a metric attached to it. I would not bring value to my clients if I couldn't measure everything I did. So that is very much a part of what we do. And I think the marketing that no longer is measured is slowly going by the wayside. Not saying there aren't companies who still do things that they don't measure. They do, because they feel strongly that if they walked away from it or if they tried to measure it, they wouldn't be able to get the information they need. But I think you can pretty much put some type of quantifying item on every action you're doing in marketing. And it doesn't have to be terribly sophisticated for some of the more traditional marketing. It can be timing. It can be, we're going to do this and this by this date, or we're going to get this many people to attend an event. Some people cannot track sales off of more traditional marketing because they don't have the tech platform enablement that they need to do that. And I get that. Attribution's hard. It's complicated and it's not easy to implement. So my criticism is if you're not trying to measure something at all, as long as you try and put some quantifying items around executions that you're doing on the traditional side of marketing, you're at least making an effort to get some data out of it. So I think until you can get to the more insightful pieces that a true attribution strategy allows you to do across any type of marketing, you've got to try to do some of that yourself. And so kudos to the marketers out there and other team members in companies who are doing their best to put some numbers against their activities. And for those that aren't, I'm saying you better jump on the bandwagon soon because those budgets are going to get cut if you can't quantify anymore what you're delivering, right? I would, as a senior leader, I would question it. I'd say we're not getting enough out of this to be able to justify it, so we can put the money where it's going to work harder.
Yeah, and that's another thing again that seems very similar to the in the work that we do, where, and of course we're not. Again, it's this cross-functional aspect of data, which is, we need to know what that marketing is very clear on what their KPIs are, but we also need to be very clear about the handoff from marketing to sales, and then making sure that sales is very clear about their KPIs, and then on to customer service, that they're very clear about their KPIs, and that those KPIs are all directly linked to the overall business, objectives and measurements.
Right. So it should, Brendan, start with annual planning, right? Because at annual planning, you start at the top and say, what are we trying to achieve in the upcoming fiscal year? And then what is each department responsible for? I would also submit that the most successful companies, it isn't a linear handoff from marketing to sales to customer service. There's a ton of overlap. The left hand knows what the right hand's doing. They know why they're doing it. They know when the handoff's going to happen and why. And they could ideally slip into each other's roles if they needed to. I think those are the highest performing teams when you don't start there. I get that. But if you're evolving toward that type of working relationship, that's going to pay big dividends in the long run.
Well, we actually have to start there. Well, we start the same way that you do by wrapping our heads and making sure everyone's clear on what the KPIs are. But then, in fact, the next step for us. So even though these businesses are coming to us ultimately for a CRM or a full stack platform across marketing, sales, and service, we have to figure out the data piece first. Then we need to go to the next step, which is, okay, so how do your processes need to change, if at all, to make sure that you're activating and generating those KPIs, on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis? Because only then can we map all that to finally do the implementation of the CRM, marketing platform, and service platform. So, and this is again one of the things that a lot of businesses who haven't done this before don't realize. They just think they're going to plug in the CRM and then they can figure out the data and process pieces, because ultimately, once we've done the implementation of the CRM, really the most critical part is the training of the people in those teams who are going to be using the technology to make their lives better. But yeah, I just love all the parallels on how you approach it. It's very, very similar to how we start. So it's data, process, implementation, and then the training of the people. So it always comes back to people, process, data, and technology.
It's amazing how process has become such an obvious need at a lot of companies. They have good people. They have decent data. They even have decent initiatives and really good, smart things going on, but there's no process. So things fall down, break apart, because there is no consistent way of executing what has been put in place. And that has been very surprising to me, probably because I worked at very big Fortune 100 companies in my career and then smaller companies later. Yeah, which you just took for granted that everybody worked that way. And then you left and you went to a smaller company and you asked how something was to happen. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, what's the process for this? What's the process for filling out a expense report? They're like, oh, just give it to me, give it to your assistant and she'll figure it out. And I'm like, really? There's no process? How do you submit this? So even those basic, what you'd call human resources type internal housekeeping processes weren't in place, let alone a process for purchasing, sales, finance, marketing, engineering to work together. So sometimes that all has to be built. And
tell us about
and
it.
That's yeah. And that's probably where you guys spend most of your time. I spend a lot more time doing that now than I ever thought I would too.
Because again, it didn't take us all that long to figure out that you're not going to be very successful implementing the technology to make processes and data move more effectively if the processes and the data are broken to start off with, right?
Or don't exist.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't exist, aren't documented. Yeah. I mean, there are a number of things.
Yeah. Because, I think another thing that, when people are speaking to a marketing expert, and they're not necessarily experts in marketing themselves, the first thing they think they need to talk about is, how do we generate more leads?
Yes. Yeah. It's either a creative question, which I chuckle a little because I draw stick people and give that to my agencies as here's kind of what I'm thinking. But you're right. It's usually the question I hear the most is, hey, Aurora, how do I get more leads? And my answer is usually, tell me why you think you need to get more leads, because that starts to peel back the onion and get at what's really happening. The reason I ask that question is, do they really need more leads? Do they need higher quality leads? Or is their sales organization just not converting the leads? So where's the true bottleneck? What's the true challenge? Is it that we need to train salespeople? Do they not have the right sales team? Or are they great and the leads that marketing's supplying them just aren't very good? So now we've got to work up the funnel and start improving that as well. So So it tends to then lead to, Brendan, you won't be surprised, me digging into what data do we have? How are we doing things? So it's everything from insights into the data, as well as process, as well as where are the bottlenecks along the way, so that we can start correcting things and doing things properly.
Which, of course, is, I mean, we probably could have just taken what you just said and taken it back, like how long ago is it now? It's actually 10 years. So we'd been a HubSpot partner for 2 years, and and when Amy and I started working together the first time, we were very, very focused on marketing, right? Because that's really when we were first HubSpot partners 10 years ago, marketing was really what HubSpot was good at. What of course what HubSpot was seeing, and all the partners like ourselves were like, we're generating these incredible inbound leads for all our clients, and they're not converting. And the sort of the whole ecosystem was, well, we finally figured it out through the data that, in fact, all these sales teams are not able to convert these leads for various reasons. A broken process, lack of training, not using the tools that they would have access to, et cetera. Which, of course, then also was the year that HubSpot launched their CRM, and then their sales hub, et cetera, which was absolutely perfect timing. And I'm sure it wasn't a coincidence, because they're also an extremely data-driven business. We, of course, jumped on that immediately, because we knew that we could never be as effective, for our clients, if we weren't able to do that complete cross-functional solution for them, by helping them figure out where those gaps might be, and then helping them figure out how to prioritize those gaps and fix them. And then we would make sure that the technology supported the new processes, et cetera, and train the people to do that, to use it.
We use them, HubSpot too, at Chief Outsiders for our own. Yep, we are a HubSpot company, and I have recommended it to many of my clients for the very reasons you're talking about. What I like is the ability to do, and you can do that. Just get a CRM platform, please, right? That's the first thing. And then the reason I like HubSpot is I think it's easy. It's easy to understand. And I like the ability to do a full circle marketing. So really tracking your customer, how they're behaving with you, the ability to segment them over time, the ability to do your email marketing, your outbound marketing from there, and keep track of everything, including linking in via API to your sales data and matching that up in the end. That's what I meant by marketers need to understand you can do some things with data today, even with your traditional marketing, if you have a good CRM platform. It just takes a little creativity and ingenuity, and probably partnering with folks like you all to help them figure out what's the best way for us to start measuring and tracking this one item that we're not ever able to, right? It won't be like tracking your attribution back from a paid social media post to a purchase. That's a little easier, but you still can make strides in that. And I love the fact that the CRM platforms today are just getting smarter and smarter and more flexible at being able to connect into different environments, right? I think HubSpot has some really good open API capability that allows you to really connect with just about anything. Those that are a little more difficult probably won't be around very long because of that.
And it's you touched on a couple of things there, but the one that we hear all the time, which we then have to tell whoever's concerned about it, that they're not alone, but also they shouldn't be concerned, is so we'll often be brought into a company that already has HubSpot, and they just know, or at least think, that they're not using it in the right way, and they're not, but their first response is, we're only using 10% of what HubSpot can do. I would say to them, well, that's totally fine, as long as you're using the right 10% that you need right now, for your business, and then you can always, add another 1% at a time. You don't have to use 100% of the tool, and I think there are very few companies that do. They're just giving you the tool set, and then you need somebody, whether it's an internal resource or an external resource, who can help you determine which tools make the most sense to match, your processes.
And Don't you also find that there's a step in there about consistency of the data that is inputted into whatever CRM it is, right? So I inherited a client who very much just follows what you outlined. They said, we're only using about 10% of what the CRM can do. We know we need to get better at it. It was pretty much a virtual Rolodex is how they were using it. And everybody, whether you were a salesperson or even someone who was operating in the business day to day, would be inputting data, and they weren't inputting consistently into certain fields, let alone half the fields weren't filled out. So the first part was, I didn't hands-on do this myself. I directed and helped drive a cleanup of the data, and then did do training and set guidelines around here's how we're going to operate with our CRM going forward. And actually did kind of a little monitoring police group within the organization. It sounds terrible, but it was very effective, because who better to kind of call out their peers who were also putting data in than people who were doing it. So it was much more effective than me as an outsider coming in saying, you're not doing this properly. That's not gonna work. But if everybody else internally is holding each other accountable, and they did it in a carrot versus a stick way, so that was good. That was the first baby step, but it took a while to get them on the same page before they could then move to really using the database the way it could be used. And it's been over a year now. They're operating beautifully. They even have their advertising agency now linked into this. So the agency's creating and sending the emails on their behalf through HubSpot, and really monitoring the data and helping with segmentation, because it's a professional services firm. And while they're really good at what they do, they have a one-person marketing department. So they need that agency support to help them actually market much more effectively and consistently.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about clean data, and it doesn't matter what CRM or CRM ecosystem you're talking about. Data hygiene, as they call it, is a very, very rampant problem, and we could probably do nothing but that. It's just other than the fact that it's it could probably be fun, but you're not actually, if that's all you're doing, you're not really seeing the total value of what a product can do. But it's a very real problem that with businesses that have had a CRM, whether it's been for a year or 10 years, that it's just a total mess, and that there's no way it can support the KPIs and the processes that they need to drive their business objectives.
Well, and for your listeners, here's a simple example. If you don't have people entering addresses with at least a zip code, your marketing team can't segment on geographical boundaries for invitations to events that are going to be in a certain market. So it's those kind of simple things that people don't think of when they're setting up the guidelines of using their CRM system internally. So that's a very simplified example of some things that I just uncover. And I'm like, guys, we just need to make sure I don't care about the street address. We're probably not going to send them direct mail that often. We can always append if we're going to do that, but I do need a zip code so I can segment digital marketing to them.
Well, this is really interesting too, because we talk to a lot of guests about data becoming a liability for them rather than an asset. And I always thought about it as like from a volume standpoint of like, we have so much data, like we don't even know what to do with it all. But from this example that you're giving, it's a lack of data, which is kind of hard to believe, but I can totally see instances where that would be a problem as well.
And I think, Amy, when you're in the opposite of that, which is we have so much data, we don't even know where to begin, I think there's a structural challenge there of stratifying what we're collecting and how we're using it, and then being able to filter it the right way to the right people in the organization. But I agree, in some of the bigger companies I worked with, we were gathering so much data, and the IT team had a plethora of data they were responsible for. And I found out maybe 3 years into my tenure at a company that we were gathering a certain type of data. And I'm like, I didn't even know we were doing that. They're like, yeah, we gather a lot of stuff that we don't ever use. And I remember thinking, wow, I thought my job was hard. This is really difficult. And it's got to be really frustrating for these folks to know that they're pulling all this data and nobody's actively using it. on a regular basis. So I do think that's a very real thing. I think I tend to work with mid-sized clients now who are more data poor than data rich. They're just not gathering it as much. So it's very different from my corporate roles where, yeah, we had a ton of data and didn't get to half of it.
That simple example you just gave, the zip code. I mean, so we have, 2 meetings a week where we get together as a team, and in one of those weekly meetings, there's at least one example of something that's so simple. Again, to us and our consultants working with clients, there are the I guess the challenge for new HubSpot users or people who don't use the tool a lot. There are 10,000 small examples like that where so someone working on our team, they can figure that out in 5 minutes. And often they'll get a call from a client, who says, I've been trying to figure this out for the last week. I've spent, I don't know how many hours trying to figure this out. And then of course, later that day or the next day, we'll get a review saying, oh my God, Henry or Daniel or whoever on the team, they helped us, in 5 minutes on something we've been trying to figure out for a week, which again is because these are small things that can make a huge difference, but there are so many of them to keep track of. And if you're not working and living in the tool all the time, you might not be aware of them.
And don't you think it's also asking the right questions up front? So what do we really want to learn? And that then drives you to the type of data and analyses that you need to do. I think that's another thing we try to help clients with is, are you asking the right questions? So you asked me how I start with a client and I talk to you about the C-suite. That is one of the questions I will ask them. What is it that you want to know? After I understand what they think their goals are and what they've set and how the data that they have today, what is it that we really want to know, or where do we think we're in the dark, or what kinds of questions do we ask regularly in this group? Or if I start to hear them ask the same questions week after week, it doesn't take much to go, well, wait a minute, that's something we probably should be digging into. So I think are we asking the right questions, or what questions should we be asking, and then guiding it that way to then get to what you just talked about, having the right analyses in place.
What do you think some of the main drivers are for people reaching out to chief outsiders? Like, they've obviously identified some gap, some need that they think you're going to be able to help with. So what are those conversations
usually,
like?
There are one-offs, but for the most part, CEOs are who reach out to us, and they've identified that they've reached an inflection point in their business and that they need help because they don't have it internally from a marketing and strategy standpoint to get to the next level. So there's usually a bit of a humbling, oh, shoot, I realize I can't do this myself and I don't have the team inherently in place. Don't know that I need a CMO long term, but I need the capabilities of that CMO. We sometimes say rent a senior executive kind of thing for the term that you need them for. Let them put the strategies in place. We execute too. I don't want to make it sound like we spend time, charge a lot of money and give you a binder and walk away. That's not who we are. All of us are operators. We all came from the corporate world. So we're not career consultants, and we've actually walked in the shoes of our clients, right? And we cover every industry you can think of. I've yet to come across a potential client where we don't have people in our company who have worked in that industry. So if that's important to the client, we can match them up with people from their industry. But I think it's more about helping. The questions that we get from the prospective clients are very indicative of where they are in their journey. And sometimes it's what Brendan said, hey, Aurora, I just need to get more leads. And then it's well, tell me why you think that. They know they're not doing it internally and they need help from the outside. And so there's a bit of self-realization there, self-awareness on behalf of the CEO. Sometimes it's the COO or CFO who reaches out to us as well. But or an owner, or we do a lot with private equity. So when private equity invests in a company, they will be the first to say to us, hey, we know finance, but we're still putting an interim CFO in because we're not going to be there day to day. We need someone who knows marketing and sales, because we also have chief sales officers at Chief Outsiders, to come in and really do an assessment. Tell us what we bought. tell us where the gaps are, and then help us build the plan to fill those gaps, right? So a lot of it is tech stack, Brendan. You'll appreciate that. Sometimes they just don't have the technology to move them forward. And so we've become, in a lot of cases, the PE firm's right arm when it comes to helping realize their return on investment quicker. And really accelerate that revenue and that growth quicker than what they had hoped.
And how often in those sort of PE examples, how often is there a need to, either introduce or totally fix their tech stack?
I would say 50-50. Sometimes the tech stack's fine. The utilization of the tech stack isn't fine. It's there again, there's no process or anything. And the tech stack might be right sized for that company. They're just not taking advantage of it. Other times, the opportunity to grow is there. And if they just had a decent CRM that was linked properly to all the other systems, the ERP system, the other systems, they would be moving faster and they'd see better outcomes from their marketing. So again, attaching an ROI to what they're doing in marketing because they can actually measure what they're doing.
Well, it sounds like you probably run into a lot of siloed data then too, if they're not thinking about how their various tech systems are talking to one another and sharing information, then everybody has sort of their different view.
I've run into clients that have 4 different CRM platforms that different departments are using. And as the marketer who has to kind of go umbrella above all of those, you're kind of like, oh gosh, where is the single source of truth for data in this company? And that's where I usually go back to, and in this case, go back to the CFO and say, all right, can we decide together on what you think the single source of truth is? And I can start there and then figure out how to roll these others underneath. But yes, so that's one extreme. And then in others, they may not have a CRM or the data is on a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet. And it's now making that move to something a bit more sophisticated that's still user friendly because people don't. I'm a big Excel fan myself, and giving up my spreadsheets would really hurt. But yes, I've made the transition. If I can make the transition as somewhat of a tech Luddite compared to you all, I think other people can do that as well. And when they see the benefits and the speed of what they can do. And AI is only going to enhance that going forward.
Well, and it already is. And you actually said something earlier about how the tech is getting smarter every day. Like in the HubSpot or any other tool that's at that level, is they're adding AI functionality literally on a daily or weekly basis, which is just making the tool that much more powerful, or the tools more powerful for the users. Yeah.
I think people don't understand the machine learning versus like a chat GPT, a language learning model, and that they're both AI. But chat GPT has gotten such great press in the last 24 months that that's what a lot of my CEOs think that's AI. They don't realize that they've already been using AI in their companies through other tools like a CRM that can actually do analysis of data. I just think what some of them are missing is building that into their forecasting capabilities. So again, a lot of spreadsheets and doing it manually. Well, I have a lot of finance friends and a lot of fractional financial folks who know how to use the AI tools that are coming up to really start to look at what the future can hold and do modeling and scenario planning. And they're just amazed because they remember being young, coming up in finance and accounting and have to do everything manually. And now rapidly they can do some forecasting really quickly. So that's another application. It's understanding that you've got these tools. And Brendan, you're right. I expect to see our CRM models just really take off, because I think as they build more and more capabilities in via AI, again, it's just going to probably blow our minds as to what we can do in the future.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And I guess for you, I mean, really as a marketer at heart, the good thing is that most of this technology has the biggest positive impact on marketers first. At least, the ones who are excited and open to using the technology. And it typically takes a little longer to get to sales and service and other teams. Whereas right now we're seeing that move, from marketing to sales to service happening really, really fast, because of AI being able to just, roll out that quickly, and the functionality is so quick. And to your point, a lot of it is machine learning. So if you can put an LLM or whatever on top of your data set, that is an incredibly powerful thing that most of us haven't even been able to wrap our heads around yet.
Agree that most people see it as a marketing tool right now for those who haven't really done the exploration. And that's great. At least they're seeing that it makes sense in one functional area. Because of that, Chief Outsiders created an AI assessment for CEOs that you can find on our website. You can take it. I think it's 20 questions. It spits out a customized report to let you know where you are on the AI journey and where you might go next. Gives you tools, links to tools you can use. So it's something that we feel so strongly about. We wanted to be able to put more information in front of you. You don't have to be a client. You can just go to the website and take it. And it will give you other very powerful learnings out of that. So, and then obviously, if you want help, we're here to help. So, that it does help us as well to offer that assessment, but you don't have to. So there's no strings attached, I guess is what I want to say. We're trying to really wrap our arms around AI as marketing strategists, business strategists. A lot of us, by the way, have general management backgrounds, full P&L responsibility in our histories. So we understand what it's like to run a business. And we look at this as where can AI touch all the different facets of business, not just your marketing or sales areas. And I think that's very helpful because it can be daunting. As a CEO, you've got a lot on your mind. And this is this other thing that's been niggling out here. And you're thinking, how can this help me? I don't have time. Create a tiger team at your company to focus on this. Make it cross-functional, but get people who are enthusiastic and excited about that and have them report back to you every couple of weeks on what they've learned and how they think you might implement it. You don't have to do it all yourself. And that's probably one of the recommendations if they take our assessment that comes out with a link to how to get started on that. So we give you guys tools as far as ways to help kind of dip your toe in the water with AI.
I guess for any marketers listening, there's another really good resource is the Marketing AI Institute. Good friends of ours, and they're they were really at the forefront of this movement and are always staying ahead of the latest tools and frameworks, and they do a lot of similar things. So for anyone who's not at the level of that inflection point of needing chief outsiders necessarily, and it's more specific to marketing, that's another one I would recommend folks check out. Marketing AI Institute.
Very cool.
Yeah,
I'm going to check it out.
Yeah, I think they actually have a course starting, I think, in the next few weeks, actually.
Imagine trying to keep your coursework up to date with the changes that are happening.
I would not want to be the instructor.
No.
Yeah.
Although they'll probably figure out a way to use AI to do that.
To just modify it.
Yep. I just gave up a couple of AI presentations. One to a group I was part of a group that was presenting a keynote speaker who is just brilliant. Almost too brilliant for the rest of us when it comes to AI. We got the whole history of how it came to be, but he was amazing. But what I did was to really get people excited about it, rather than having those of us who were presenting him talk about our companies and why we were doing this, and here's what we do, and contact us if you need help. I created a video using Lumen 5 that talked about the keynote speaker, the topic. I put graphs in from McKinsey and Gartner and BCG on AI statistics, et cetera. And then at the end, I was able to put headshots of all of us who were the presenting sponsors of the event, a little bio about each of us. And Lumen 5 set it to music, made me look like I was a videographer. And at the end, it said, by the way, this video was made with AI. And people were kind of blown away. They thought we had a professional do it, right? So those are the kind of things that are just really emerging and fun to play with, and yet make a big difference, right? And there's a perfect marketing example. It's not just about writing; it can be about creating. Canva lets you remove things from photos or change things around. Things that used to be hard for the marketer who isn't a creative to do, you can now do some things and look quite professional at the same time.
And HubSpot just launched their new content hub last month, which of course is just going to get better and better as a way to remix existing content, which is again another incredibly valuable but time-consuming thing. We know that ourselves, and where you can drop a blog post and then soon it'll be a podcast episode into HubSpot, and then it'll essentially create at least the draft for a blog post or some LinkedIn posts or whatever social posts, which just saves the marketer or whoever's trying to get it out so much time, and or you can just get that much more valuable content out. It's still quality content, and not just quantity content.
Amy and Brendan, for those folks who are still worried about AI taking people's jobs over, MIT did a study over the last, I think, 18 to 24 months. And if you're interested, I can get it for you. But basically, the outcome of the study was they did AI only, AI with humans augmenting, humans with AI augmenting, and human only, and AI only and humans augmented by AI were the best outcomes. And so I think in some cases, yeah, AI can do the job. But in most cases, it's augmenting and making the human better, because in some cases, you have to come up with things. You have to come up with the strategy and then use AI to make it better. So for those who think it's just going to replace, or maybe some misguided folks who think, I can skinny down my workforce, it's more about improving the quality of the output of the work and more volume quickly. So speed to market will improve. Efficiency is a great word, right? But I still think there are folks out there, and we come across them every day, and they're like, "Oh, this is going to be great. I can streamline costs because I don't need as many employees." And I'm like, "No, now you've got employees doing more thought leadership work, not the grunt work that they've been, mired in for so long."
Which means they can help more customers or clients. It's not just you're just making better use of their time so they can get more done in less time versus replacing them with a machine.
Well, and Brendan, customer service, you brought that up earlier. That's a perfect example. If you can take care of the basic questions using AI and escalate the tricky ones to a live human to handle appropriately and consciously, perfect.
Well, it's not only perfect, it's actually it's now an expectation from many people, including myself, and I'm on the older side of the demographic. I would far rather have all my questions answered by an AI bot or agent, and never have to speak to a human, unless of course that's the human eventually has to take over. Then I'm more than happy to do that. But it just makes everybody's your customers' time is incredibly valuable too. Make it as easy as possible for them to serve themselves. So it's good. It's good for you and it's good for them, and ultimately creates a better experience.
And you can measure it, which is even better. Going back to our whole theme of measurement and data, and putting metrics against things, it's much less subjective.
Well, before we do wrap, are there any kind of closing thoughts or things you would want to leave our listeners with, whether that's advice or something that you see in the future that we should keep our eyes on?
Back to the whole driving growth, driving revenue, the whole reason we started our conversation today. There are always opportunities to start to improve within an organization first before you have to do radical changes, right? So I would always counsel, of course, I'm here to help, right? But look internally first and just listen to what others are saying. It's that cross-functional teaming again. So whether you're leading a function, talk to your people about, how do we improve? It's hard to make the time to do that. I referenced the fact that in this post-pandemic workforce that we have now, you're not physically getting together face-to-face as often as you used to. And that naturally had you, as a leader, initiate those conversations, whether it was one-on-one or with your team. Now you're on Zoom. You've got a finite amount of time that you're talking. You're not just walking by their office and dropping in and having a chat, right? So now you've got to be much more conscious about it, but continue to mine the the brains that you have for opportunity, then start looking at how do we improve it. And then obviously, I think when growth is at an inflection point and there's either too much data, not enough data, or just discomfort with how do we do this, then yeah, you have to go maybe externally and get some help with that. And that's where your company and my company make a ton of sense. And we're here to enable. Like, I don't go into a client company and expect to be there for years and years and years. Now, some of our clients prefer that. And we have chief outsiders who have been at the same company as their acting CMO for 3+ years, right? But the average time we spend is about 6 months because it takes a while to get things up and running. And then we want to see and make sure and test that it is actually working. But we want to then train the team and make sure they can run the day-to-day. Or if that team isn't at the level that they need to be, we'll help the company and backfill our position so that they have a leader in there. We'll onboard and train that person. So it is seamless. When we leave, things continue to keep chugging along. As far as data and measurement, I said it once before, it's here to stay. And if you are a marketer and you have initiatives in your toolkit that you're running that you don't have tight measurement on, you need to start looking critically at that. Because if you don't, someone else in the organization is going to do it eventually, and you want to be on the front end of that. So you should constantly be looking for ways to measure. And you should partner with people like Amy and Brendan to help you with that if you can't do it yourself. Because sometimes you can't. Sometimes you are that person that's taking a week to try and sift through the data and figure out what's going on, and you all can come in and give the answer like that. So that data is your friend. It helps you get better at what you do, and it is part of marketing. Marketing is an art and a science, and it is the science part of marketing.
Yeah, that's really good. And actually, we've never seen marketing and CFOs work more closely together than we're seeing now, I think we'll see that trend continuing because, again, their common language is the data that's driving their business growth, right?
And the revenue at the end of the day, because marketing exists to drive revenue for the company. We are the internal advocates for our end users. We're probably one of the most objective functions because we're not inwardly focused. We know we have to drive revenue, but we have to do it through our end users. So we have a completely different perspective than finance, which is why when the CFO and the CMO or head of marketing partner, you get power because they have completely different perspectives, but the goals should be the same.
Really good. Aurora, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Thanks so much for having me.
Did you enjoy this episode?
Find more at RevOpsChampions.com.